go out on the outside studio here and commune with the hummingbirds. Well, I think it was mildly interesting, right? I think so. Anyway, here we are. We're back. Hi, Suze. What's going on? How are you? It is the aftermath of the eclipse, and welcome to the 11th house live stream. Hello, 10 Dragon. And there's the cheeky monkey. And there's Judy. Hello, hello, hello. How is everybody? This is the after party for the eclipse. And if you're in the chat room, obviously you've been invited. Hi, Tanya. It's still as hot as equatorial Africa here in Texas. Wow. It's hot all over, but not as hot as it is in Northern California, where the poor people of Redding are being absolutely incinerated and chased out of their homes. Hi, JW. Welcome to the proceedings tonight. Please bring strong drinks. Scoobs. Hey, Scoobs. Hi, Farrah Jade. Yeah, so we're going to talk about what happened to you during the eclipse and what's going on after the eclipse. I think it's a pretty interesting topic of conversation. And certainly there's been some very interesting events leading up to the eclipse, and always in the aftermath of the eclipse, things can get pretty intense. A lot of events can and will happen that are quite interesting. And we're actually going to talk about a few that happened after the last eclipse, before this one. And obviously we're going to talk about kids, because they were in the crosshairs and have been in the crosshairs during this true node in Leo phase. And we're also going to talk about some of the sex stuff tonight. It's Jupiter in Scorpio, and it is now moving forward. So we're getting this effluvia of what's been hidden, occulted, and pressed down into the nether regions of our culture and our media. And I've got a few interesting anecdotes to share with you. As a result of what's happening, we'll be going back in time, and we'll be looking at the period of October, November of 2012, October, November of 2012, when Saturn was just going into Scorpio and setting all of this up with this Jupiter in Scorpio and the expansion of what's been occulted and hidden from us. And it's coming out in a really, really big way. And we're getting it both in terms of what's happening contemporarily, and also some of the things that have also happened historically as well. So we'll be looking at that tonight. Of course, the chart of the moment. I've got a little trick that I'm showing you tonight. It's really not like an amazing trick, but it has to, again, deal with relocation. And relocation is one of the things that I'm very interested in. I've seen how relocation astrocartography works in dozens and dozens of experiences in my own life. So I'm going to give you tonight a chart to look at, and maybe even give you a little relocation kind of exercise to do. And the chart is Arnold Schwarzenegger's chart. It's very interesting to look at his chart from Austria to Hollywood, where he made his fame and fortune for the most part. So we'll look at that tonight. And thanks to our good pal Lynn, I hope she shows up tonight. She sent me a link to a film about Sergei Magnitsky and this guy Bill Browder. It's really fascinating, and so I recommend this movie. And if Lynn, if you're in there, just type it in, okay? So we're going to look at Bill Browder's chart. And Bill Browder is a guy right now that's kind of in the crosshairs. He's one of Trump's biggest critics. He has, as the millennials say, a shit ton of money. He's kind of a hedge fund version, a modern version of George Soros in some ways. And we're going to look at the placement of Uranus in Bill Browder's chart. It's going to be an interesting little experiment. So that's kind of the headlines for tonight's show. Hey, this would be the time that Ed Sullivan would have been on, right around this time Sunday night, right? I think so. Hey, Liz, what's going on? All the way from Bali. Bali High. Yes, indeed. So I'm just going to kind of ask you folks, how was the eclipse? How did it affect you? How did you have any discernible event happen? Did you have some kind of internal piece of emotional terrain that you have gone through? Hey, Lynn, why don't you go ahead and type in, since you're here now, Lynn, type in the title of the movie that you sent to me. Can you do that, please? That would be great. We're going to have a little blink out here. It's kind of like a magnetic pulse. Hold on. Mr. Astrocat. I think he's happy that I'm inside today. By the way, Jasper wasn't feeling too well last week. And I took him to the vet, and I found that there's a possibility he's like pre-diabetic, and they said get him off of the kibble. And I got really good kibble, so we're back in the wet food now, and look who's back in the high life again, Mr. Jasper. So anyway, so let me just go through here. Lots of childhood. 10 Dragon, 8 Dragon says, lots of childhood thoughts and experiences came to mind. That's in alignment with the sun and the moon in Aquarius. There's Alan, the Magnitsky Act, behind the scenes. Okay, or behind the scenes. Okay, Lynn just put this link in to the chat, the Magnitsky Act behind the scenes. And it's, number one, it's worth watching. Okay. Well, here's Jasper. He's very happy to be back on the air. He loves astrology. Jasper is the Astro Cat. He is the Astro Cat right there. Good guy, right? And so he's been missing my whiskers. I think both cats kind of like freaked out because they didn't recognize me once I shaved. So I'm growing a little bit back, and you can see that it's actually making a difference in Jasper's life. He's looking pretty good, right? He's healthy. He's in fighting shape right now. He's getting back into fighting shape. You know what I love about Jasper? Okay, I'm going to have a little cat moment here. I love that Jasper lets me do just about anything I want to him, right? He's actually really good at this. What I love about Jasper is pulling back his face like that. He actually likes that. He actually likes that. Anyway, thanks, Jasper. You're a good sport. So the movie is the Magnitsky Act behind the scenes. Find it. We're going to talk about Bill Browder tonight. We're going to look at Uranus as a force disruptor in his chart and what it does to a person's life. It is the great leveler. Remember that. So any other comments about what people went through over the eclipse phase, during the eclipse phase? Any other pieces? Oh, urine crystals in his bladder. Never died. Yeah. He's off the kibble now. He's off the kibble. It's all wet. So my experience with the eclipse is that I'm going to echo Judy there. I've been really energy drink. I had some coffee. I had a double espresso. I had an energy drink, and then I had a bunch of tea with guarana and black tea. And man, I fell asleep. I couldn't believe it. That's how tired I was. And even on Friday, I was, and I thought it was because I was working out really hard. But even Friday and today, driving back from Dripping Springs, man, I was asleep at the wheel. So this is a very interesting eclipse in terms of energy. Now, on the previous eclipse, the July 12th eclipse, I didn't have any problem. I liked it. I was high, and it was actually a really great time, energy-wise. That was fantastic. But today, this last weekend, this eclipse has really just sapped me. So what is really going on? I mean, so the moon we had a blood moon. Mars was closer to Earth than it's been in what, like 30 years or something like that. I mean, this is the longest eclipse for the next 120 years in terms of duration, right? So there was a lot going on with this eclipse and Mars and Aquarius. And, one of the things that, we tend to think about in terms of the moon is a true celestial object, that it was brought here at some point in time. You guys know all that stuff about the moon, right? That the moon is actually really like this metal kind of here. We have a cycle of tides. We have a cycle of all the things that connect us to, like, the power of the moon, right? That's what happens with the moon. And the moon is a transmitter or a transducer. That's what the moon is. And that's the role it plays. So we get connected to that as a kind of an agent or an agency of emotions, right? But it's really this power of the moon that amplifies experience. And when we have the moon in, say, Aquarius, and there's that conjunction with Mars, that's really potent. It's very powerful. And it amplifies not the emotional content, but it amplifies the energy and the essence of the sign that it's in. So in this case, it would be Aquarius, it would be the mind, but all of the air signs rule the central nervous system. So when we get into like a really powerful eclipse in an air sign, it's actually impacting us on an energetic level through the nervous system. One of the things that the moon has, again, part of its kind of archetypal, historic, mythic lore, is that it's also this soul catcher, right, between the sun and the earth. And so there's a lot happening with the moon. And when we engage with it, at least on a conscious level, because a lot of people are talking about the eclipse, writing about the eclipse, yours truly, we're actually charging that experience along with the experience itself. So we're engaged on an emotional level. So we're creating this feedback loop with this celestial body that's actually probably a lot closer to us than we've been led to believe in a lot of ways. So we have this amplification of the energy of the sign that it's in. Now, since the full moon is in Aquarius, and that's where we're eclipsing with, obviously, central nervous system, but then there's the shadow piece, right? So what happens when you're shut down? What happens when you're tired? What happens when your nervous system is overtaxed? What kind of thoughts come to you? What are you dealing with? And I'm going to propose that one of the things that this eclipse has done is it's brought the component of the shadow to our consciousness, right? Through the mind, through images, those images getting transmitted into thought and feeling, right? So I think that we've been dealing really with this very intense kind of psycho-emotional kind of conductor over the last few days. Now, what happens in the aftermath of the eclipse is interesting too, right? So right now we're in Pisces, and we were dealing with this kind of very collective energy in Aquarius, very, very collective energy. And now it's in Pisces. And so in Pisces, we go into a whole new state of consciousness where things become a lot less solid. The path is not that clear. It is about dissolution. So wherever it's taking place in your chart now, I think the next few days after the eclipse is really powerful because you're getting kind of the afterburn. And I think this eclipse opened us up in a lot of ways, right? It basically switched on our heads in Aquarius, and we began to relate to ourselves and our emotions through the mental construct. And in this case, it's the shadow of the eclipse that brings up the sort of the portent of images and feelings that are inside of us, that exist in kind of the shadowy realm inside of our head. So now what happens on the backside of this? Now we're dealing with Pisces. We're dealing with the moon in Pisces. It's right there, 0 degrees tonight. Right here, right now, we are in the first degree of the moon in Pisces. Disillusion. There's a loss of direction. There's a loss of, to some extent, clarity. But there can be also something else, right? I feel like over the next 48 hours, we're going to be tested. And we're going to be tested in ways that ping us in terms of, again, this hidden material that we have probably put inside of a cupboard or, a safe in our minds. And as we move through this next phase in Pisces, this energy becomes much more diffuse. It becomes much more part of our experience. And it can be profound and enlightening and allow us to rise above if we can let things go. Or it can create chimeras that have been unlocked and unleashed during the eclipse, during the shadow of the moon, right? The shadow of the moon in Aquarius. So now these chimeras of our minds have been unleashed, and now they're swimming around in this tide pool or this deeper pool of Pisces, the moon in Pisces. And this is where things get stirred up. Now, what's interesting is that 48 hours out from now, we're going to be dealing with another change of scene with the moon. It'll be in Aries. And that'll be like dealing with new emotional content or new emotional scenarios. So this period between Aquarius and Aries right now is really important because there's a lot of kind of psychic effluvia that has been released sort of in the backside of this eclipse. So, I mean, you might see people kind of go nuts over the next 48 hours. I would not be surprised if you see people kind of lose their emotional bearings. I'll give you an event. It would be kind of the socio-collective equivalent, right? How many of you have heard what happened to Betsy DeVos and her yacht in Florida? Now, she's got 10 of them, so don't cry for Betsy DeVos. She's the Secretary of Education, and she is she's part of the Amway fortune. Okay, so they cut her yacht loose. I think that's a great metaphor for where we are post eclipse with the moon in Pisces. There's a yacht out there somewhere, right, that's floating around. I mean, they've got it back. The yacht's been recovered, but that's the metaphor. And the next phase is getting that yacht back into dock. So this moon in Aries is going to be really important. It's going to be an important kind of bookend for what happened during the eclipse on Friday, right? So this next 48 hours is going to be real interesting because your internal theater is going to get played out. Anything that you've been sort of stowing away, there's another maritime metaphor, stowing away on the good ship shadow moon, that stuff's going to come out. And you get to deal with it. And it's okay because this is the time where things are getting shaken up. We were living in the time of chaos, and we can embrace deconstruction or we can fight it. And again, when we get to Mr. Browder's chart, we'll spend more time with that. So you guys kind of getting this flow around this moon for the next 48 hours. So you kind of picking that up. So there can be great progress. I mean, water is a powerful thing. It can be very cleansing. And that's one of the things that I would suggest is maybe doing a little cleanse here for the next 48 hours. And when the moon kicks into Aries and you can move forward and you can weld your will and intention to your psycho-emotional content. Okay. All right. So why don't we get into the chart of the moment? I've got that pulled up here. Unless anybody else has any true confessions for the eclipse. Any other eclipse stories? Anything? Shadow government on moon base. Ooh, I like that. I like that. Shadow government on moon base. That sounds cool. Farah Jade, I've gone into hiding. I'm taking rescue remedy and bathing 3 times a day. Yeah, there's some intensity with this moon, I'm telling you. Black market medicine. says, my Mars is 4 Leo, Moon Aqua, just watching the shadows from a distance, getting remotivated. I like that. Tanya, my mother lost her mind and a friend of my brother's got ran over. Wow. Charla says, I feel real grungy after both interactions. Need to do a sea salt. Yeah, I think that'd be really good. Judy, they found my mother's stolen car the day before the eclipse. It was burnt to a crisp. Heat is a big deal right now. Am I right? I mean, this fire in Northern California, wow. You know, one of the reasons why these fires are so hot now is because the planet has so much accelerant thanks to the geothermal spraying in the aluminum inside of the aerosol spray. It's gotten into the vegetation and made it incredibly flammable. Really, 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 really flammable, right? So when we get these fires now, they're like hellacious. They're super fires. And look, I have a theory about what's going on in California. I feel like there's a big kind of clear cut that's taking place, and they're not going to go in these areas, or they're not going to rebuild, and they're going to move people or try to move people into the Agenda 2030 scenario. And the fires are part of it, and it won't just be California. Okay. So why don't we go into the chart of the moment, shall we? Let's do that. If you want to, you can get right to it over at astro.com. And speaking of Aquarius, that's the rising sign for right here tonight in Fredericksburg, also known as flyover, with Mars at 3 degrees retrograde. Now remember, Mars goes back into Capricorn, 28 degrees. And then it moves forward, coming back into where it ultimately went retrograde, which was 9 degrees Aquarius. It's a very, why don't we do this? I haven't done it. I don't know what it is, but why don't we look at the Sabian symbol for like 910 Aquarius? This is where Mars retrograded. Let's check that out. If you're not familiar with the Sabian symbols, I love them. They were created by Mark Edmund Jones and Elsie Wheeler back in San Diego, long time ago. It's a great story. Edmund Jones used the double-blind test. He didn't know what the card was. She didn't know what the card was or the degree was, and they were non-sequential, right? So they were all over the place. He put down a card, and he wouldn't know what it was. Let's say it was 7 Gemini. Should tune in, right? And then this is the image. They go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, and finally they settle on it and scribble it down. And then once that was all done, they did 360 of those. They arranged them all the way to the end, right? From 0 Aries to 29/30 Pisces. So let's take a look at where Mars retrograded. And I love the interpretations by Rudyard. I think they're terrific. So let's get into. I'm going to read both 9 and 10. I think 9 is really important. And then 10 is also significant. But I want to start with 9 Aquarius. And with the Sabian symbols, right, we read up to the next degree. I like reading both. Linda Hill, who's a great Sabian symbol interpreter, she always interprets the symbol before, the symbol after as a group. And there's usually kind of an interesting connection between all three. So let's go into Aquarius 9. This is an interesting one. There are a number of symbols inside of the Sabian symbols that have to do with flags. I think there's at least 3 or 4. I know there's 3 for sure. 2 of them are part of my symbols. So one is a flag bearer in battle, and the other is a ship lowers one flag and raises another, and that's for the 0 Cancer. So let's read this. 9 Aquarius. A flag is seen turning into an eagle. Okay, this is a Carlos Castaneda kind of thing, I think. The dynamic incorporation of new social values in individuals who exemplify the spiritual potential and the greatest significance of these values. I'll read it again. The dynamic incorporation of new social values in individuals who exemplify the spiritual potential and greatest significance of these values. Let's keep reading. This is what Rudyard has to say. This symbol nearly duplicates the one for Sagittarius 12, but in this fivefold sequence, it has a somewhat different meaning, especially since the last term of the mysterious transformation, the crowing of the eagle into Chanticleer's fashion, is omitted. All that is implied here is the vitalization of a powerful symbol, its embodiment in a living reality, i.e., in a person able to fly in consciousness to the highest spiritual realm. The archetype is given substance and wings, given living substance and wings. The image has become a power. So what Rudyard is talking about is this transubstantiation from the flag, which is a symbol, into something animistic, a spirit, and not just any spirit, but an eagle that can soar, right? And there's this potential of a vision that's involved with this because the eagle has such great vision. So here's the final piece here. This fourth stage symbol, as usual, gives us a technical suggestion to see the new archetype, to perceive the new standard of value. With one's mind is not enough. The seer must become the doer. The impersonal is dynamized and brought into focus. We have here the acting out of the vision. This is really important. We're going to look back on in time, and we're going to see this Mars retrograde period as being, I think, one of the most important mid-astrological transits in recent memory. And the reason I think that's the case is because if you look at what's happened since Mars went retrograde, it has been absolutely tremendous. And just recently, over the last couple of weeks, there's been a plethora, an effluvia of these situations where people are like babbling brooks when it comes to, being engaged in some form of trafficking when they were young. In this case of Sarah Ruth Ashcraft, SRA. I got a story about SRA I want to share with you tonight too. And then, of course, there's the Isaac Cappy thing. I mean, there's a lot going on right now. And what's happening is not really quantifiable unless you've got a massive computer somewhere within one of these fusion centers in the NSA or some mega control room in Tel Aviv or someplace like that, or maybe even Google in Palo Alto, California, somewhere, or maybe there's a network of nodes that are compiling this information. I believe that they can actually quantify and graph people's consciousness and awareness that is being ignited and getting to the cusp of action. And you could probably see this on both sides of the left-right divide, right? Like the left is, what's interesting about the left is that now all of a sudden they become patriots, like Peter Strzok's a patriot. Comey is a patriot. Mueller is all of a sudden, all these, it's like they're waving the red, white, and blue. They're Captain America now. The left is, because, it is in America's best interests that these men sacrifice themselves as true patriots in order to defeat the hidden hand of influence and corruption of the Russians in one Donald J. Trump. Everything has been flipped upside down now. We're living in bizarro world. But that's how they do this stuff. This gets into this movie. What I'm going to cover in a bit, this movie with Bill Browder, where the script is totally flipped, and then it flips back again. It's really, really mind-blowing. But this Mars retrograde piece is seeing the left becoming theoretically like more active, more reactive. Of course, they've been on this precipice for a while. But on the other side, there's also this whole QAnon consciousness. Now, I have mixed feelings about QAnon. Most of you know that I'm not the biggest Q follower in the world. but I do believe that something is happening there. Now, is it a piece of mind control? Is it a psyop to get people kind of riled up, but at the same time, keep them docile? Because the mandate is, trust POTUS and get your popcorn, watch the show. So it's an interesting dynamic, getting people fired up, but telling them to pump the brakes, right? I mean, that's fascinating. But what happens if it is a psyop and they can't control it? Meaning that the overwhelming feeling of what's taking place within that kind of sector, or in a specific kind of energy pattern and wave that is on a rapidly escalating curve and cycle, right? This is happening right now. And somewhere in these cyber vaults, they're actually able to decipher this and see it on a graph and on a scale. So I think this has really had a lot of traction in just the last couple of weeks, especially during these eclipses, as a lot of the pedo stuff has risen to the surface. And I'm telling you, that in conjunction with the true node in Leo has fired this thing up. And people on this side of the equation, I think, are sharpening their swords. I think we're getting close to a moment, and I'm not sure, the swords could be metaphorical, right? But that's what this symbol is talking about, where this embodiment of this ideal, and let's say the flag in question here is the flag of the United States of America. It represents an ideal. It represents a number of different things to a number of different people. But let's just use sort of the Make America Great Again contingency. That flag represents something kind of sacred, right? It is a patchwork quilt of 50 different realities that are all knitted together, right, for this collective, for this whole. And that theoretically, the sum of the parts, creates the strength of the whole. I mean, and there was a time and a period where that was actually breathing, right? It was breathing. The flag was breathing. It was alive. It was kind of a living entity. You get up every morning, you put your hand across your chest at school, and you said the Pledge of Allegiance, right, to that flag. Now, most places they don't do it, but over here, the little school across from my place, every morning I hear the Pledge of Allegiance. I'm up with the flag raising ritual every single day here. Anyway, I think this is what this symbol is referring to. Now, if you're a QAnon person, you'll go, yeah, right on. This is great. This is great. But I think QAnon, to me, I think QAnon is it's like an accelerant, just like Trump was an accelerant. When I was a kid, I used to play with Hot Wheels, and there was this track setup. The cars had no batteries in them or anything like that. And so what you did is you either hooked the track up from a pretty high bookshelf, and cars ran down, did all kinds of stuff, or you had these things called superchargers, and the superchargers were battery operated, and they looked like garages, and they had these spinning wheels on the inside with pads. So if a car went through the supercharger, it spit it out, right, and then it would accelerate. So Trump, and I'm not going to get into Trump as an actual being, right, and his dirty past, and trust me, he's got a dirty past. If you're in politics, you're in business, you got a dirty past, and you share your name on books with people you probably don't want to be within 10 to 15 paragraphs of, okay? And that probably gets out to his friend, Mr. Jeffrey Epstein. But the ideal, right? So Trump, I think, represents this kind of ideal of the eagle that's been personified by the people. They've taken that on. Like the people, there has been a significant amount of transference that's taken place. And when I saw Trump on the horizon and knew that he was going to get elected, people were dissing me. And it's like, Robert this, Robert that, politics, it's bullshit. Well, I always thought of Trump as the supercharger for the Hot Wheel coming through, and so that we could get supercharged, but not necessarily align ourselves completely with Trump, right? Because this was energy. This was theoretically energy. Like if somebody was indiscriminate in terms of the energy, it would just be energy. Like when Obama was elected, boy, was there a release of energy? Somebody who's really into energy would just ride that and they wouldn't care. You know, the Trump election, somebody who's indiscriminate with energy, they'd ride that and they wouldn't care. Along the way, they might have some interesting insights, right? But that person would not be a polarized individual. Think about that for a second. Anyway, we hit the accelerator, and there's an acceleration that's taking place, and it has to do with this destruction, the mind-forged manacles of politically correct thought and politically correct speech, which we've talked about ad nauseum here, right? So theoretically, right, the flag is a symbol for that. The transformation into the eagles, people are now sort of taking it on. They're taking flight. They're becoming this embodiment of the ideal. That's what's going on, and it's happening at a quantum rate. So, God, who's the author? Oh my God. Shoot. There's a French story, short story I wanted to talk about. All right, I'm gonna see if I can come up with the author's name later. But it's an interesting short story. Let me tell you the short story. Guy de Maupassant. Guy de Maupassant is the author. And he wrote a short story about a whore. And this whore was in a French village, and she died. And so they're having, a ceremony for this whore. And by the way, whores mostly don't get a lot of respect. Now, something interesting happens during this ceremony. Yes, somebody who is of, I would say, in that community, good standing, somebody who has good character, somebody who's kind of looked, well upon by the people in that community. He begins to cry over the death of this whore, and so, and because his sobbing is so profound, right? There's this chain reaction. And no, I think it was a sister. It was a nun. That's who it was. It was a nun. The guy chimes in later. There's a nun who begins to kind of sob over this young woman, right? And then everybody begins to sob in this big collective kind of wailing, and they don't even really know who they're sobbing for, right? But it's a very transformational experience. And I think what happened after prior to the election was kind of like that in a lot of ways. And so now we're kind of riding on this tide of energy, at least, and it doesn't matter what side you're on. If you're on the left side, trust me, there's plenty of energy for you to ride on as well, right? But this is an interesting time, and I believe that there is something happening, something very profound, and the flag is being turned into this eagle. Okay, now here's Aquarius 10. A man who had for a time become the embodiment of a popular ideal is made to realize that as a person, he is not this ideal. So this is also part of this. The need to deal with human beings as persons rather than as screens upon which one projects one's dream and ideal. Sounds a lot like Hollywood to me. And looking at these people that we theoretically have idolized, and they're not that. Is this potentially even images inside of ourselves? Absolutely. Here we have a final statement on the relationship between mental, spiritual vision and living reality, between persons and the ideal they appear to incarnate, between the great lover image and one's need for love. A love his presence stimulated and aroused. The star on the movie screen is not the actual person. Bingo. Okay, this is coming. Let me read you this line again. Okay, the star on the movie screen is not the actual person. The star's popularity fades away, the person remains. What has this episode of popularity actually done to the person? This is a question that can be applied to a great variety of circumstances. The fifth symbol in the 60-second sequence brings to our attention an issue that is basic and may confront us in various forms. Person versus archetype. This can mean a critical need for self-reevaluation. Now remember, at one point, as we were going into the eclipse phase, the moon hit this degree of Aquarius 10. Okay? It hit this degree. The self-reevaluation phase is on. This is part of it, but it's also the degree that's one up from 9 Aquarius, which is where Mars went retrograde. It's a very interesting time. I'm telling you, there is a lot happening. There is a hell of a lot happening right now. You know, Alex Jones, who is an Aquarius, was shut down on Facebook, and he can't do live streaming on YouTube right now. They've banned him from live streaming. So what they do is they shoot a segment and they get it up really quickly, hour 1, hour 2. So there's a bit of a delay. And the challenge with that is that they can't have real or live interaction with the crawl and the chat room like we're having right now. So I wonder if Alex Jones is going through some level of self-reevaluation. Interesting stuff. Let me check in with everybody in the chat room and see how we're doing here. How's life? Hi, Teresa. How's it going? Okay, what's going on? Judy. Okay, what else we have here? At least Trump is a devil, we know. Trump is the wild card. He's the Trump card. He is the fool. He's got Sun-Uranus conjunction in Gemini. And I've been saying this to people for a long time. Even if you think you can trust Trump, you can't. Not with the Sun-Uranus conjunction in Gemini. That's just not going to happen. Not going to happen. And there's some really interesting stuff going on with 9/11. You know, Trump knows where all the bodies are buried. He absolutely knows. Steve Pieczenik was on his was talking with Owen Schroyer, and he said, "Should I try to do my Steve Pieczenik? Donald Trump knows where all the bodies are buried, Owen. He knows there are all the neocons." I can't really do a Steve, but he knows where all the neocons, who all the neocons were. And this is what Pieczenik said. He said he knows the Jews that were in on it. And Pieczenik is Jewish, right? Like Pieczenik is not like Netanyahu, by the way. So, I mean, he's like, Pieczenik's busting stuff out. And he says Trump knows everything about 9/11. That would be interesting. That is the wild card. I think that's the ultimate wild card. This is the ultimate extortion piece. And would Donald Trump use it if he had to? One never knows, right? Never knows. All right, let's get to the chart of the moment. Let's get into that. We started off with Aquarius rising. It's still there at 13 degrees. Oh, the moon has just moved into 1 Pisces, and it is opposite in a very, very wide opposition with Mercury in Leo. Guess what Mercury's doing? It's going backwards. Mercury retrograde. You know the score. You know what to do at home. Don't sign those contracts. No. No. Do not sign. Put them off. It is a good time, or it can be a good time, to get things taken care of and to repair things. Go back. Do your books. Look at your finances. If it's appropriate, take care of your car. In Leo, if you've got issues with some of your kids or your grandkids, look at where this is setting up here. We went through the last, 11 degrees, right? Where the moon had been in Aquarius opposite Mercury. And we've got Mercury in Leo, which does represent children. And we have the sun in Leo and the true node in Leo. And that Mercury's going backwards. I think this is a good time to mend fences with your kids. Mend fences with your kids. Mend fences with your grandkids. I think we can do some interesting things here during this time, with this Mercury retrograde. And it's going to get back closer and closer and closer into that square with Jupiter. That's going to be very interesting because remember, on a collective level, we're dealing with kids right now in kind of a big way, right? I mean, this kid stuff is kind of out of control in a lot of ways. From the Thai soccer team that was trapped beneath the surface, in these watery caves, and kids at the border, and now these kids that have gone missing in Des Moines, Iowa. Have you been reading about that? That's mind blowing. Over the last few weeks, these kids, and they're not young kids either. These are not kids who are like 5, 6, 7, 8. These are teens, 12, 13, 14, 15. And there are hundreds of them over the last few weeks in Des Moines that are gone. Now, I'm wondering if this Mercury retrograde in Leo, as it gets closer and closer into that square with Jupiter, is going to bring some stuff up, and hopefully it's not really morbid material. Because when we get into Scorpio, we're talking about death and the underworld, and not a lot of people. It's not getting a lot of play in the news, but certainly in the alternative news sector, people are starting to talk about it. Posted it up on Facebook earlier today. Well, it's not just the potential for those kids teens who've gone missing, but also the stuff that's connected with sexuality and child sexuality. Now, the DSM is now basically saying that pedophilia is it's a condition. Wow. Okay, it's a condition. The DSM has just legitimized pedophilia. That's what they've done, which means, well, it's treatable. But if you are convicted of some form of pedophilia, now the DSM says, well, he can get help for that. Don't put him in jail. Give him suspended sentence, time served in some institution, time, days reduced moving forward. That's what he's going to do, and he gets out and does it all over again. So we're looking at the normalization of pedophilia. One has to wonder in some ways. I'm not saying that there's a conspiracy by the pedophiles to bring this stuff up in Hollywood, right? But it's kind of odd in a lot of ways. I mean, I'm not saying that that's there, but when you watch this film about Magnitsky and Bill Browder, you can see the Machiavellian levels of what takes place and how people sell things, from a murder to a cover-up to the introduction of a bill in the United States of America. I mean, it is so pathological and sociopathic, it'll blow your freaking mind when you see that. Now, can that same kind of Machiavellian mindset be part of the exposition of pedophilia in Hollywood? I'm just throwing it out there because it is igniting a lot of people, and it's getting people stirred up. But what else is it doing? It's getting people to kind of talk about this thing. And is it part of a long-term strategy of normalization? I'm just wondering. Or is it a gambit and a risk that they're going to turn the volume on this so loud and create a level of saturation that everything else is swept up in it? But at the same time, that level of saturation and that volume could actually move people towards some form of action. Then you've got crowds with, torches that are on fire and stuff like that, where they're going out and they're trying to burn people down, right? I mean, so which part is it? In any case, we're going to see more of this, and we're going to see more of the expose as Mercury retrogrades and gets into that square with Jupiter, right? It's going to open everything up. Now, one of the things that I wanted to talk about is that if you go back into the year is 2012, and it's October, November, this is when Saturn begins to move into Scorpio. And before Saturn moved into Scorpio, one of the things that I got into on my website was talking about what was coming. And what was coming was going to be the expose of child sex, necrophilia, all these kinds of dark and sub Gothic pieces of sexual activity is going to start to become exposed, and it would be the Saturnian kinds of figures that would be the first ones to sort of become besmirched or blotted by this, right? So of course we saw Jerry Sandusky right after that. Joe Paterno, even though he's not involved, it was the end of his coaching career, steps down, he dies shortly thereafter. Go over to England, we have Jimmy Savile, and who does Jimmy Savile hang out with? Was it Prince Philip and all the royals? And so we've got this whole Jimmy Savile thing going right to the crown, right to the crown. And if you got into Second Mile with Jerry Sandusky, there was all these Saturnine figures, people that were on the board of Second Mile, and all these executives who would get these kids who were supposedly there because they didn't have dads, and it was part of this mentorship program. And all it really was it was a chicken farm, and Jerry Sandusky was the chicken hawk, right? That's who he was. So this is all happening during Saturn and Scorpio. If you go back and look at my early stuff, right around my stuff around that time, I talk about this. Well, here we are, Jupiter and Scorpio. So we're looking at the amplification or the expansion that took place when the revelations occurred. Again, we're talking about the end of 2012 and the beginning of 2013, which was basically that period where it was Saturn and Scorpio until it flipped over in 2015, became Saturn and Sagittarius. So 2012 to roughly 2015, right? That's the time. That is the time when this stuff became known to us. It hit Saturn, the mainstream culture, because Saturn is mainstream, correct? That's what Saturn is. It's the world. Here's Jupiter now. It's expanding and bringing it all to the surface. That's what we're seeing. And especially with the emphasis of children, with the true node in Leo. Now it's coming out. And it's a very, very interesting kind of time that we're in. Because on the one hand, there's such repulsion and people getting activated and triggered as a result of this. And they're like, we gotta take these mothers out, right? That's what's happening. And on the other hand, you're getting these people who are now trying to use this as a talking point. Like 50,000 people signed a petition to get James Gunn, back in the director's seat at Disney. So this is a very interesting time. We're watching a morality play of biblical proportions. We've never seen anything like this except for maybe Babylon, to be honest with you. This is really big. This is really, really big, what's happening with the kids and these stars and people in situations of power. Now, is it going to be that thing? It's going to be that little Jenga piece that you pull out, and everything comes tumbling down. Well, we'll see. Oh, you're witness to history. This is really big, super big. And I think that this, because Mars is going to go back and it's going to go over that south node, right? It's getting close right now. In fact, it already did. The south node is at 5. It's going to come back again, hit that south node one more time. It's going to be the media. It's going to be people being active and aggressive inside the media. Like this guy, Isaac Cappy. Now, I don't know what Isaac Cappy's full story is. I know he's an actor. He got switched on to the pedophilia thing because he was a buddy of Seth Green in Hollywood. And I guess it was through that where he began to make all these connections. He's not a Corey Feldman type. Corey was around it all his life, and Corey played it for as much as he could in his own way. Corey's kind of on both sides of the ledger sheet. I think Corey took advantage of this on a number of levels. I certainly wouldn't want to have that scenario in my life, but I think Corey, made some money off of it. And he's known people for a very long time, and his family, which he never talks about, which I got into an expose of, is very strange. Very, very strange. His sister was with Disney. She was second generation Mouseketeer. So the week ahead, because we're starting Monday off with this Pisces moon. Remember, this is the backwash of the eclipse. We're dealing with sloppy right? But the good news is that we can course correct and make changes quickly. Look at that sextile with Moon and Uranus. Bang, right? Make the course correction quick. Then there's that sextile with Saturn. Once the form is broken up and you can move towards the materialization of new form, seal it with that sextile to Saturn. Move on, do something constructive. This could be a great time, a really, really great time. Again, there's this phase of self reevaluation that started, right? That started at 10 degrees with Mars and Aquarius, and I believe is triggered during this eclipse. So now we have the ability to make changes. Make some changes. Face your shit. Face your shit. This is a good time to do it with Pisces. I've spent all day facing my shit. Trust me. It was a good shit reflector day, and very positive in a lot of ways. And it was kind of a struggle at times today too, because I wanted to buy a kayak. And I was in search of a kayak for a good price. And I was told that there was a certain kayak for like $160, right? And it was a sitting kayak. I'm like, yeah, I'm there. I had to go travel 45 miles to go see this kayak, and I got there and it was the wrong kayak. Hello, Mercury retrograde, right? It's all good. It's all good. So patience, let's practice a little patience. Moon sextile Saturn, it's right there. Right there. We can practice patience with ourselves. We can be our own patient parents, right? Sometimes parents could be really patient, and it was usually for the stuff that you wouldn't think they were patient for. Am I right? I remember one time when I was in college, it was, let's say, how do we say this? It was a very pivotal weekend in my life. I don't want to undersell this weekend. It was big. It was a really, really big weekend. Changed my life. And it started off with me passing out the wheel of my car. I think I was 21 at the time. I think it was 21. It was April of 1981. And so it was a Friday night, and I had been doing things I shouldn't have been doing. I passed out at the wheel of my car, and I bounced off the center divide of the freeway. So I was fine. The car was banged up. It set in motion a sequence of events that weekend, which changed my life and put me on a trajectory which ultimately got me in front of the screen right now. But I was going to college. I was living at home with my parents at the time. And I remember coming back on Sunday, and I had this whole side of my car, looked like a Lay's potato chip, or it was a Ruffle. I had a Ruffle potato chip on my poor little Fiat. And I go up to my parents to come in, and I tell them what happened. And boy, were they cool. It was like, holy shit. I was expecting some, psychodrama, but no, it was like, so parents are funny that way. They're always patient when you thought they wouldn't be. And when you thought, oh man, this is a slam dunk, man, this is an easy sell, right? What happens? All of a sudden, they're just all over your shit. What? It's not a big deal, right? So you can have the opportunity of being your own patient parent right now, sitting with whatever it is that you're looking at or dealing with. And I know people are doing like salt baths and all kinds. That's great. And it's great. Treat yourself well. Be patient with whatever level of imperfection you're dealing with. Just be patient with it, especially if you're just whatever age or whatever stage. Just be patient with it. I think that's going to be a big theme here over the next 48 hours. Dreams should be very intense tonight, by the way. Keep a record of your dreaming tonight. I think it's going to be a high peak dream night. All right. Let me just check back in with everybody again in the chat room. What do we have here? How are we doing in there? Hold on. There's a lot of people. But we got 82 people here tonight. That's awesome. You're weird here. Wino or rhino? Is there a difference? Love to have one on. I think he's a wino. Oh, I'm not a wino. Not tonight. No wino tonight. No. The eclipse I'm on a phone with a broken screen. I was just venting. I've been here the other time. Okay. Well, I'll tell you what. If I was a wino, I'd rather be called Dionysian. How's that, Charles? There we go. Let's see. What do we want to do here? I wanted to get into Arnold Schwarzenegger's chart, which you can go to over on astro.com. Tomorrow is the governor's birthday. Yes, he's born July 30th in Graz, Austria. So he's got a very interesting chart. You know, Arnold's really a lot more sensitive than people think. He's a Cancer rising. He's a sensitive man. He's a very sensitive man. He also has Venus in the first house. So I guess he's had some success with the ladies. I think he's like a world-class groper. He's one of these guys that got away with stuff, right? In kind of a big way. Like Arnold was legendary. And the hashtag #MeToo has not put its thorny glove upon Arnie. However, I wanted to just bring up his chart here. It's an interesting chart. Now I'm looking at his birth chart. He's got Mars and Uranus conjunction in Gemini, 12th house. This is a man who has some enemies, by the way. He's got a few enemies. But he's also very clever. That Mars-Uranus conjunction is very, very clever and is an indicator of meetings behind the scenes with people, unusual alliances with the Mars-Uranus conjunction. Now, it was rumored that Arnold Schwarzenegger, prior to becoming part of the special election process, was seen at a hotel in Southern California with the likes of Warren Buffett, Pete Wilson, and Kenneth Lay of Enron. So these were the people that had met privately. You can look this up, by the way, with Arnold Schwarzenegger to discuss what would ultimately be his insertion into the gubernatorial process for the special election. Now, that would be a Mars-Uranus 12th house kind of thing, right? Behind closed doors, hidden, tucked away. But there's also some interesting stuff in his past. It is not just a rumor, but a fact that his, I believe, great uncle, was a Nazi, right? So Schwarzenegger has these natural born Nazi connections, which he's had to answer to on a few occasions. But when you look at like his voting record and his social stance, he is clearly not a conservative. If anything, he is a liberal from head to toe because it serves his cause and helps dilute the calamity of his past in some ways. In fact, he even married a progressive or a person from the progressive or democratic side of the bloodline in Maria Shriver, right? So that thing that happened in the hotel was basically them getting him elected as governor of California so that he could cover up the Enron affair. That was his main goal. Everything else was just another Hollywood dog and pony show with Arnie. So we have the midheaven here in Pisces, but most of his 10th house is what? It's Aries. And what is he known for? He's known for bodybuilding. Very masculine. And then the action films, correct? That's also Aries in the 10th house. Now, Pisces tends to be mythic, or at least it has the capacity to be container of a multitude of myths. That is the nature of Pisces. It's all the signs in one, right? Pisces is this collective ocean of experience, this mythopoesis. It's all in Pisces. It's the dream. It's the ideal. It's the hero. It's the villain. It is the virgin. It's the whore. That's the nature of Pisces. It's all there. So we have this up at the top of this chart in Pisces, and then there's Aries, which is, it's male. The first film that Schwarzenegger really comes onto the scene with is Conan the Barbarian. who really, I think, comes out of that kind of, that historical, or, kind of meta-historical Aries, age of Aries, age of Taurus, swords, blood, sorcery. That's Aries in the 10th house. It's also kind of this Mars-Uranus conjunction in the 12th. Where do people really discover Schwarzenegger? The movie theaters. That's a 12th house experience. He's much more, I wouldn't call him an intellectual, but I'll tell you right now, Schwarzenegger has an amazing memory. And I don't have any proof of this in terms of anecdotal evidence, but he's got Mercury in Cancer on the ascendant, and it's trining Jupiter. And Jupiter, by the way, is in the 5th house, and that's in the house of Leo, which is, acting. So he's got some elements here that are interesting. But if you look at his chart, everything is below the horizon. He can self-actualize. He can make some money with Pluto-Saturn conjunction in Leo, acting. Again, you can make a ton of money here, but it's not going to be as actualized in some ways as if the most of the planets were in a different part of the chart. So here's what I did. I went to, I relocated his chart. I relocated Arnold Schwarzenegger's chart, and it's an interesting relocation. Let me see if I can find it here. And you can do this yourself if you want. You can relocate it. So the relocation, the relocated chart, has Capricorn ascending, and his midheaven changes. So this is for Hollywood, right? This is his relocated chart for Hollywood. He has Jupiter on the midheaven. Midheaven 13, Scorpio, Jupiter. So his career takes off in Hollywood with Jupiter and Scorpio. Massive success. Trining his Mercury, trining his Venus, and all of his planets go over to the 7th house. So we're talking partnerships and deals. Who knows what kind of business deals he's got going on. But clearly, he got married, and he had an affair with his maid, and he had a very 7th house kind of thing. But actually, that would be more 12th house or 8th house. And he has moon in the 12th house there. His moon is in Capricorn, right? So that's interesting. He's got a, mamacita hidden off in the 12th house. That's a secret pregnancy. But also, Hollywood becomes his home with the true node in the 4th house, and that Mars-Uranus conjunction goes from the 12th to the 5th, and that's Leo's house, and again, that's acting and action, right? And it becomes a Capricorn ascending with Aquarius. This is a power move. So now we have more of a constellation in some ways for Schwarzenegger's success. And it's the relocation which put Jupiter conjunct his midheaven by 5 degrees. And Mars and Uranus come out of the 12th house, hidden, tucked away, and become more exposed and actualized in the 5th house. Now, when we look at relocation, it's kind of like a 1A and a 1B with the natal chart. So when you have the natal chart on top, it's kind of like the mission statement. That's what the natal chart is. It's the mission statement. And when you relocate, well, you've got kind of new coordinates inside of the mission statement. Things get changed up. And sometimes they're changed up considerably. I'm a big advocate of relocation. If you're thinking about it, you are moving, you should really get your chart done. I'm serious. It's a big deal. So I just wanted to give you an example of how this kind of works, right? When Schwarzenegger's planets get lifted up, he has more of a public persona, especially with Jupiter in Scorpio right there on the midheaven. Okay, one of the things that I wanted to do now is I wanted to talk about this Bill Browder character and what's going on with Uranus there. But let me check in with the chat room. Let's see what we have now. You may present need your resources where you get this from online, YouTube, etc. I've been studying, Charles, I've been studying this for quite a long time. Maria is a Scorpio. That's right. She is a Scorpio. Absolutely. Terminator, great movie. Love Terminator. Fantastic movie. It was great. It was James Cameron at his finest, right? It was like a kind of a cyberpunk film. Arnold has a very strange friendship with Fabian Nunez. That's why Arnold reduced the murder charge time Nunez son served. Man, you guys are sharp. I have a really sharp chat room. Really, really sharp chat room. You guys are, where do you guys get all your sharpness from? Hi, with relocated charts, which charts do we use to gauge astrology? I think you need to use both, okay? I think having both is really important. I would say you probably get hit first on your natal chart, and then, then there could be like secondary or tertiary with the relocated chart. That's how I would. Can you share your screen so we can see? I can't share screen. I wish I could. That's going to change though. That is going to change. If you go to astro.com, okay, you can get Schwarzenegger's chart. It is there, right there. And then what you can do is you can actually type it in yourself. This is actually a really good exercise, by the way. If you want to do this, right, go to astro.com, get Schwarzenegger's coordinates, and then enter them in as a separate birth date. And when you do that, you'll get his chart inside the program. Then you go down into more chart selection and modify data, which is reference place. You want to modify that. And when you modify that, you will put the reference place for Hollywood, click on that, and then go to the drop down, hit relocated chart, and bang, you'll get his relocated chart. It's a really good exercise. You can do this for yourself, any place in the world. Now, the other thing to astro.com, which is great, is that you could just use their astrocartography, and you can find out where the cardinal points are lining up, right? Planets are lining up at the cardinal points. And that's a good place to start. You always want to look at the relocation after that. Charles says, question, where I live on the globe and the time of my birth, how does that affect my chart? Well, if you still are in the same place that you were born, probably not much, but it changes by degrees when you move. I mean, I hope I understand your question, Charles, but it moves by degrees. And sometimes what's really interesting too is like you can move between, like I did a chart for somebody last week, and there are two Almontes in California. There's one in Northern California, and then there's one in Southern California. And so I had the Almonte from Northern California in the chart, and this person was a Scorpio rising. And they said, no, I'm actually a Sag rising. And so, okay, well, let me change the Almonte. So I changed the Almonte, and it turned it into a Sag rising chart. That's pretty, pretty specific and pretty meaningful in a lot of ways too. So even if it's just by degrees, Southern California kind of bends in, and Northern California is kind of like this, right? Like if you look at Reno, Nevada, it's actually more further west than Los Angeles, which is kind of a mind blower in some ways. Okay, so let me see what else we got going on in the chat room. Anything else? Let's see. Because he doesn't have a huge ego. He actually interacted with me first time. Oh, there's a Teresa. Okay. Who's next? Okay. Hey, so let's see. Where do we want to go from here? Let's look at Bill Browder. Now, I don't have a chart for Bill Browder, so let me just let me bring this into sort of context for everybody. Okay. So Bill Browder is a guy who's an American. He's a British financier, and he is the co-founder of Hermitage Capital Management. It's an investment fund. And basically what he did is he was dispatched to Russia after the Soviet Union collapsed, basically to start sucking up all this money. I mean, there was a massive kind of gold rush to the former Soviet Union. And Browder was one of these guys who went in and was a big time king scavenger. And, there were lots of things happening. People were changing documents. You had the oligarchs stealing oil, i.e. Khodorkovsky, and then you have Putin putting him in jail and putting him on ice for a long time and reclaiming Yukos for the country versus Khodorkovsky's theft of Yucca. Fascinating time. Okay, you've got now all of a sudden the oligarchs are cool. They could come back like Roman Abramovich. another oligarch. He fled to England because he thought, man, they were going to get his ass for stealing all these assets, right? So he went and he bought a soccer team. And who does he own? I think he owns, is it Chelsea? He owns Chelsea. So Abramovich has now covered his ass, and he's got citizenship in Israel. So if he needs to get out of England, or if for some reason they try to Skripal them, even though Skripal was not really Skripaled, he can go to Israel. But it was a very crazy, wild, mind-blowing time. And a lot of that stuff was happening Saturn in Capricorn, and then after that, Saturn in Aquarius. That's when the wall falls, and that's when, all these kind of robber barons like Bill Browder go and start picking off the bones of the carcass of the former Soviet Union. So this Browder character has got it, as again, the millennials will say, a shit ton of money. He apparently hired this guy. Well, apparently he did. His name is Isaac Magnitsky. And he hires him because theoretically there was a raid on his offices by Russian police who took the original documents for his company. What was the name of the company? Mare. Anyway, they took the documents for this company, and then, according to Browder, they stole the company from him, and there was about $250 million in taxes that Browder had paid. And through their chicanery, this guy who was a police chief and his corrupt buddy, they were able to become mobsters and have a ton of money and yachts and girls. And this guy Magnitsky, whom Browder had said was this bright young lawyer that he had hired in order to excavate this money in this case, Magnitsky was not even a lawyer. I mean, the guy was an accountant. And essentially, if you watch this movie, you'll see this filmmaker who was a big Bill Browder guy, because Browder took on Putin and human rights, and he had become kind of like this folk hero in some ways for the alternative press and the left, and sort of the progressive and the sort of the humanists in Russia. They liked Browder because he didn't take any shit from Putin, and he stood up for human rights and all this stuff, right? But what happened was that Browder was covering up for his own crime. You've got to see this movie. You have got to see this movie. It's amazing. It is absolutely, and it's on the news right now. Breaking. We've traced 3.5 million. This is from www.news.au/finance. I'm going to get into this. This is going to be fascinating to watch, especially from an astrological perspective. This guy Browder has been a thorn in the side of Donald Trump and the sort of the conservatives, the neoconservatives, the MAGA heads. He has been a thorn in the side because he has a ton of money. He's anti-Putin, and there's probably a strong possibility he was involved in some of this other stuff. Like he could have been involved in the Steele dossier, maybe the meeting with Donald Trump Jr. So this is going to be very interesting to see how this plays out, because this guy's a player and he hates Trump. He totally hates Trump. Well, what happens is this filmmaker who absolutely idolizes the guy begins to take this thing apart from his own movie. And then he begins to realize that Magnitsky was set up. Even after Browder had come to the United States and gotten Obama to sign this thing called the Magnitsky Act, which basically might have been even a setup for Trump. This is going to be so fascinating to see how this thing plays out. So there's $230 million. It was a tax rebate fraud. Okay, so let's get into this. This is from, I'm going to read you this, and then we're going to get into the chart piece, which is absolutely fascinating. Okay, so this is from news.com.au. Sunday night claims links between Australian banks and Russian criminals. Whoa. Links between the major Aussie banks and Russian mobsters involved with money laundering and murder have been revealed. A Russian exile named Alexander Perepilichny sets out from his $12 million mansion outside London for his daily jog. Mr. Perepilichny is a wealthy man thanks to a long career as a money launderer to Moscow's elite. But today he's worried, and with good reason. He's just blown the whistle on his former employers in the Russian mafia. Okay, so keep your eyes on this thing. Now, Browder is still being covered by the Western press. So it says here, it looks to me like murder, says Bill Browder. The American-born financier has been described as Vladimir Putin's enemy number one. I believe he was poisoned. Mr. Browder has good cause to be suspicious. So what they're doing here is they're selling this story. They're selling the Magnitsky story. Okay? They're selling the lie. This is really, really interesting. Said, Mr. Browder, now based in London, hired an up-and-coming young Moscow lawyer, Sergei Magnitsky, to find out what happened to money. He wasn't a lawyer. He was not a lawyer. He was an accountant. Magnitsky lied. So this is all going to come out. It's going to be fascinating to see how the press spins this. Okay. Now here's what I want to do. If you just go into astro.com, it's going to be real simple. There's not a chart for Mr. Browder, but I can tell you when he was born, you go into astro.com, and you look into ephemeris, and you click ephemeris, Swiss ephemeris, go to 1964. Go to April 1964. Then you want to go to April 23rd, 1964. And what you'll see is it's called the solar chart. When you look at a line of code inside the ephemeris, and it's code, it is called the solar chart. When you look at a chart, that's called the natal chart. Two differences. What we know is that Mr. Browder has his sun in Taurus at 2 degrees. Look where Uranus is. Bang. It is bang on his sun right now. Right? So this is going to be a very interesting time for Mr. Browder, because if it comes out that he indeed did set up Magnitsky, then his empire and everything that he kind of stands for is going to implode. So this is going to be a fascinating and absolutely fascinating study in astrology. It's going to be very, very interesting. Now, remember, Uranus is going to go retrograde. It goes back to 28 degrees Aries, and it's going to come back around again, and it's going to hit his sun one more time. So what's going to be fascinating is to watch what will happen in the retrograde period, because it could start a kind of the cycle of people looking back at Browder, looking back at his life, looking back at what happened during what's called now the Magnitsky affair. It's going to be so interesting to watch. So we might, not that I don't take any great glee in watching people implode. Maybe a little. Maybe have a tiny bit of schadenfreude, okay? But, therefore the grace of God would go I. But if it's the truth, that it's in service of the truth, then let's see this deconstruction take place. Because that's where we are now. We're in a time of revelation. So we have Mercury retrograde in his chart at 9 degrees in Taurus. So even the Mercury retrograde, going back, like this filmmaker going back and kind of redoing the film of Bill Browder and this whole experience, it's a very Mercury retrograde kind of experience. And we got Mercury retrograde going on right now. Keep your eyes on this cat. And you may see him disappear, by the way. What else do we have? We have Venus and Gemini in his chart. And that's at 17 degrees, Venus and Gemini. So we know that this guy can be shifty, right? With Venus and Gemini, he can be super shifty. And he's got Mars in Aries, so he goes after what he wants. And there's a reason why he's filthy rich astrologically. He's got a Sun Jupiter conjunction in the sign of Taurus. The guy's a dragon, so he's got some juice, no doubt, right? He's got that Sun Jupiter conjunction in Taurus. That's money. Mars and Aries, you know what that is? That is just, head down will. It's will. It's pure, undiluted will, Mars and Aries. But we've just gone through, the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stations, including the moon. There's no water there. He has no personal water. Here comes Saturn in Pisces. There's the water. Saturn in Pisces. But that's not great water, Saturn in Pisces. You know what that is? That's like water is penance. That's like Guantanamo water. Saturn in Pisces. That is dealing. Saturn in Pisces is intense, man. Like, you have a person that has Saturn in Pisces has a really strong kind of moral code that they can't get out of in a lot of ways. So he's transgressed his moral code, and to a large extent. And with that Saturn in Pisces, I think there'll be repercussions for it. Uranus is in Virgo, and Neptune is in Scorpio. So it's not quite a Sun-Neptune opposition. We got it's about 14 degrees is Neptune in Scorpio. And then, of course, he has Pluto in Virgo, and I believe that's conjunct his moon. So he's got a Pluto-Moon conjunction, a Sun, Jupiter. This guy is kind of fueled and driven by what I would call power and piety. Power and piety. The power part is Taurus. The piety part is Virgo. And what did he name his investment fund? Hermitage, right? He named it Hermitage Investments. It was a hedge fund. The Hermitage is very much aligned with the sign of Virgo and the Hermit, right? He's got that Moon-Pluto conjunction. Wouldn't surprise me if Mr. Browder knows a little bit about astrology. His true node is in Cancer, which means his south node is, guess where? It's in Capricorn. So we're talking 4 degrees Capricorn. So Saturn is going over his south node. It will retrograde over his south node. This guy, he's going to have dues to pay. I'm telling you right now, you're going to see the implosion of probably the biggest threat on this guy. It's like, here's Soros and here's Bill Browder. They're very close in terms of maybe a little higher than Soros. But watch this guy implode. It's going to be fascinating to watch. Absolutely fascinating. Neptune is on his Chiron. Saturn retrograding is going to hit his south node. Uranus is on his sun, retrograding back, and he's going to come back again. It's going to be fascinating. Watch the movie. That's a Uranian thing already. I watched it on YouTube. And Lynn sent me the link. Lynn, put it up again one more time if you can. Not the link, but just the name of the movie. And it's been taken down a lot on YouTube. She sent it to me like 3 times. So watch this movie while you can, because you're going to see somebody get caught in their freaking tracks. Now, unless it's a kind of a level and a layer within a level and a layer, maybe the movie is part of this, sort of, this layer of this kind of matrix and this scam. But I don't think so. Watch the movie and you'll see that Browder is a complete and utter sociopath. And he is not only set this guy Magnitsky up, but he actually turned Magnitsky into a martyr, and he has become the Peter. He has become the Peter of Magnitsky, and has created this kind of cult of, it's almost Christ-like in his suffering, because he was connected to this corruption and graft of the Russian government. It's fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Watch the movie and watch what happens with Bill Browder. We're going to see real life drama unfold before our very eyes. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Nice, we got a nice. What's the name of the movie? Hey, Lynn, can you put it up there one more time if you're still on, Miss Finka? I can't just put the name of the movie in the in the chat bar. If you can, I'll put it in there. So, okay, good. Thank you. Hey, what's going on, Paula Tuttle? How are you? Thanks, Lynn. I really appreciate it. So it's in there. Just scroll through the chat, and you can see the movie. It's called The Magnitsky Act Behind the Scenes. Watch it. It's a really well done movie. It's definitely kind of a whodunit. Definitely a whodunit. Speaking of sociopath, have you ever done charts? Rick Davis or Louise Mensch? No, I have not. I have not. Rick Davis. I'll look them up. I'll definitely look them up. Revelation, yes, but no movers and shakers will be exposed. Seems to be the trend, doesn't it? Seems to be the trend. But I tell you, every now and then, they sacrifice one of their own, right? They sacrificed Harvey Weinstein. They sacrificed, what's his name? Oh, God. It's escaping me now. But they'll sacrifice one of their own every now and then. It's what happens. And it could be, maybe Browder's time is up. I mean, if they think that they can get Browder's assets, then they could Randy Quaid star whack it, right? No, it's not Kevin Spacey. It's the hedge fund guy. What's his name? We all know who his name is. The guy who stole all the money. Sacrifice. Yeah, every now and then they do it. They sacrifice one of their own. They eat one of their own. That's what happens. Madoff, thank you. Yeah, Madoff is another guy. One would think that they sacrificed Ken Lay and the Enron dudes, but I think Ken Lay got relocated. I think he got extracted. Rick Wilson. I'm talking to Never Trump activist with the daughter with black son. Oh, okay. I don't know. Yeah, Bernie Madoff is the guy. I'll have to look. Some of these people, it's hard to do charts for because there's no charts, but we can look at the solar chart, which is what I did tonight. Yeah, Bernie Madoff. I know. All right. So I want to do two stories. I knew somebody who had invested with Madoff and actually got some money back, believe it or not. But it was through the Wilpons, who own the New York Mets. So I wanted to talk about this whole thing with the kids and in this true node in Leo, where we're going on with Jupiter and Scorpio. And so a lot of people think that this is kind of not a lot, but there are certain people that think it's a mania. And I saw this big debate on Joe Rogan this last week about whether or not it's a spoof, whether or not it's a mania, whether it's a conspiracy, what's real, what's not real. And I just want to pass along again a story that happened to me quite a few years ago. I was friends, really, really good friends with a therapist, and this guy was a really well-paid therapist. And this is before I got into. I was into certain things, but I wasn't in this area. And what he actually specialized in was satanic ritual abuse. He specialized in it. And if I knew today what I knew then, I would have picked his brain a whole lot more. We talked a little bit about it. And what he told me, this is a guy who is not a conspiracy theorist. He's a clinical psychologist, but he had a number of people come to him and share their story and their experience with him. And he worked with them on a psychological level. And he said, without a doubt, 100% it's real. And it's not just random, that there were actually, a network set up out there. So take it for what it's worth. This comes out of the mouth of a therapist that I knew was actually a really good friend of mine. Joe Rogan claims Soros was captured by Nazis and didn't give Jews and their belongings to Nazis. He's also tied to Hicks and Jones via Sacred Cow. That's true. That's absolutely true. So you have on the one side, Alex Jones basically saying the same thing. He's saying the same thing that was on the, I think it was 60 Minutes interview with Soros, that Soros was actually absconding material. He was working with the Nazis, and Soros admitted it, right? This is Alex Jones's party line. Then you have Joe Rogan saying that it's not. So here we have this massive cognitive dissonance piece going on. And I think it's really kind of ripping people apart in a lot of ways. So try to find the center if you can, and keep her straight and yar. I'm talking about, he was talking, the late 90s, SF Bay Area murderers. The news network. Yeah, I actually was living in San Francisco Bay Area at the time. And this guy was a therapist. This was in the 90s, by the way. Interesting stuff. Very interesting. Anyway, I just wanted to pass that along. Somebody who was a professional, you might find of interest. Okay, well, this has been a real gas, boys and girls. We're now an hour and 40 minutes into it. So I try to wrap it up around 90 minutes. But I really want to thank you for being a part of tonight's show and the live stream. You're one of the best chat rooms out there. Sharp. You guys are totally sharp. Even if I am being compared to Dionysus or Bacchus. Okay. Hey, thank you again, everybody. Have a great week. Get into this Pisces moon on the backside. Let everything surface, right? Make those adjustments and seal new deals with yourself. All right? All right. Are you taking orders for readings in August? Yes, I am. So I'm going away this week, but I'll be back the following week. On the Pisces moon, man, my Pisces mother is coming into town. How about that? How about that for astrology? Isn't that a kick? All right. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to shape what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. For me and you know who, Jasper the Astrocat. Have a great night. Yeah, that's right.